I'd like to say that I don't know why Mr. Nadler suggested striking that particular provision. There is high crime in urban areas, and we need to study it. There's high crime in Memphis. We need to study it. But it's not failed democratic policies. It's problems that exist in America. But it shouldn't just include urban areas, because rural areas have high crime too. A lot of drug crime. Meth started in the rural areas and is out there. We need to give rural areas as much interest as we give urban areas in fighting against crime. To suggest that there's not high crime in the rural areas is wrong. It's there too. It's in urban areas and rural areas. We don't need to defund anybody. We need to have more police, and we need to protect them, and we need to protect our citizens. So I'm all on that. Mr. Chair, if you would yield for a minute, this section, I've been concerned about the weaponization of the federal government's program. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear that the federal government Justice Department was weaponized during the previous administration. Michael Cohen went to jail for doing what Donald Trump asked him to do. Donald Trump was called Individual One. He didn't go to jail. He didn't even go to jail when the administration changed and Merrick Garland came in. They let the statute of limitations run, which why, I don't know. We had a Merrick Garland before this committee, and I questioned him at length. Why don't you go against individual number one who ordered Mr. Cohen to do what he did? But when Mr. Cohen was in jail, the administration decided to put him in lockup. They put him back in jail when he was out because he was going to publish a book, and they wanted him not to speak and abridge his First Amendment rights. And then they put him in solitary confinement, and they did everything they could through the Justice Department. It's come out. It was the Justice Department that did that. Could we go, Mr. Chair, back into those issues and look at the weaponization that occurred during the Trump era, particularly that Michael Cohen incident? That's the one that galls me. A guy went to jail because he worked for Donald Trump, and he did what Donald Trump told him to do, to cover up the payments to Stormy Daniels that have all kind of other ramifications. Can we go back into that and these rules?
What I remember about Michael Cohen is the first big hearing that the House Oversight Committee had was with Michael Cohen in early 2019, I believe. And Michael Cohen lied 7 times under oath in front of the House Oversight Committee. We actually did a referral letter to the Justice Department. So that's what I remember about Michael Cohen and his testimony in front of the United States Congress.
But you do remember he went to jail. You do remember
that too.
That he went out and they put him back in when he was going to publish a book because they wanted him to not comment on it. And you do remember that when they put him back in jail, they put him in solitary confinement.
I don't recall the details about that.
Then that's
what I do recall is what he said in front of Congress, and he said all kinds of things that weren't accurate.
But Mr. Jordan, that's why I ask, should we not be able to study that, because you don't know it. I know it. It's clearly out there in the public sector. I've read it so many places, and it's been shown that the federal government and Barr did it. Shouldn't we study that? That's weaponization.
What I would say to the gentleman from Tennessee is what concerns me about the Democrats' amendment is, in Part 2, the very first big paragraph on the United States Department of Justice, they say that we shouldn't look into the targeting of parents. We know that happened. We know that happened. They said we shouldn't look at abuse of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. We know that happened not because we learned that necessarily, but the Inspector General told us that happened, and now we have to reauthorize Section 702. That seems to be something entirely appropriate for our oversight.
Mr. Chairman, this is my time. I'm going to reclaim it because.
But you asked me a question. That's how I would just respond.
But you're not. That's not the answer. The answer is about.
Well, you may not like. That's my answer. You may not like it, but I'm allowed to give the answer.
The question was, can we go back to what Trump did to weaponize the Justice Department? I don't know about parents. I'm all for parents, but that's not the issue. The issue is the weaponization of the Justice Department that happened under Trump like never before in our country's history.
I was talking about the weaponization of the Justice Department.
I yield to Mr. Schiff.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and he is absolutely right. Let's consider an Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, intervening in specific criminal cases to help cover up for then President Donald Trump, intervening in the sentencing of Roger Stone against the urging of the prosecutors on the case, unheard of since Watergate, intervening in the case against Michael Flynn to make the case go away completely, again, against the interests of the prosecutors in the case. The Durham investigation of the investigators, a complete bust, a complete waste of money and a bust. Now, my colleagues on the other side say their rules aren't stating a conclusion. Well, let's look at their rules. The rules say, let's look into the Justice Department's use of unprecedented and aggressive law enforcement tactics against political opponents of the Biden administration. Well, certainly seems to suggest a conclusion, doesn't it? They're not saying the Biden administration or the Trump administration or any administration. No, they're only interested in one thing, in stating the conclusion they want to reach before they even begin an investigation.